Welcome to everybody. Thanks for coming today. This is a webinar on maximising student enrolments to grow revenue. It's aimed at senior decision makers and managers from further education colleges and training providers. Perfect time of year for further education colleges based on the fact that it is ramping up to the peak time of admissions. So hopefully we can be of some value. Purlos has had a lot of experience in this area, as has CC. The webinar series that we're running this year, we are aiming to do one micro webinar every month. So we will be doing it on different subjects, but they are all around post-16 learner engagement. So hopefully very relevant for the people watching today. So without further ado, I will just introduce you to our amazing guests today. I've spent quite a bit of time with both of you over the last few months, and it's been great. So I'll just quickly give you a very brief overview to me, and I'll let Sally and Deirdre introduce themselves. Yeah, it was quite embarrassing looking at this slide, Sally and Deirdre. I was looking at, there was a lot of there was a lot of BEs, DBE, OBE, nothing on my side. But I think probably what you've got both in common is a massive passion for education, but also hard work. I think you're two of the hardest workers that I work with. And it's kind of nice to see that that passion is seeping through after however long in the industry. But just to give people an idea of who Purlos is, so I'm David, I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Purlos. We're now 3.5 years old, been working with further education colleges for that whole time. And for the last couple of years, been working with training organizations, with government organizations, and now universities as well. And just to give you an idea of what we do, we increase learner engagement and decrease student dropout using things like AI and WhatsApp to connect to learners. We've created a digital assistant, and we look at improving conversion rates during admissions for FE colleges and training providers, but we also track destinations using the same approach. So the start and end of the learner journey. But Sally, yeah, it'd be great to introduce yourself if you can.
Hi, thank you, David. Well, up until a year ago, I was a CEO of a large, complex group of further education colleges working in Oxfordshire, Berkshire and Surrey, and a group of schools. Since leaving there, I've held and now roles a board member of universities. I sit on 2 commercial boards that are EdTech. I also have been doing training and innovation in the sector, and my real interest, if you like, is how we learn and how we improve learning. And that is what I've been doing work on, is curriculum design, innovation, leadership and coaching. Over to you, Deirdre.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much, Sally, and thank you, David, for the kind invitation. I'm hoping that there's a little bit of background noise. I'm hoping it doesn't interfere here. But I'm Deirdre Hughes. I wear a number of hats. I'm delighted to have a very close communication and complementary work alongside Purlos. So I set up a company called CareerChat UK Limited just 2 years ago. We've been very interested in how can we improve career support, not just for young people, but adults. In particular, we developed CC, which is a career chatbot powered by AI. I'll say more about that later. But I think number one really is from an enrolment perspective. We really want to look at the use of artificial intelligence, large language models, and really see how can we build a really strong evidence base to strengthen enrolments as people navigate their way through our education system.
Perfect. Great. Fantastic guests. Great introductions as well. Yeah, I guess I would like to start just at the start of the webinar thinking big picture rather than just going straight into admissions and growing revenue, which is the main subject. So I guess I'd like to ask either or both of you, in the last year, what have you seen of some of the kind of big trends or the big challenges or big focuses of, let's say, post-16 education? You could look at FE, you could look at training providers, but generally post-16 education. Have you seen anything that is interesting in terms of opportunities, challenges, big things going on? What do you think, Sally?
I've seen, in terms of technology, I think there are some colleges doing some really interesting work, whether that's Aston Bryant in the north or USP in the south, using VR, AR, metaverse, and how you use technology to improve the learner experience. So that's interesting. Big issues for colleges are definitely staffing. The other issues for colleges is the whole, what happens now that we're in the public sector, not private sector. Universities are very concerned and are looking at an integrated degree system because of the changes. So I think in both the FE and HE sector, there are huge changes. And I think technology will resolve some of the key issues if we use it in the right way. I think there's also an issue looking at Generation Alpha coming our way in that's 2010 babies coming our way not too soon in 26, and some of the expectations they will have in terms of technology and in customer services will be much higher, and they won't accept, I don't think, the same level of systems that we have in many of our colleges. But we will also need to look at things like oracy and creativity, which is much less in that generation.
Oracy and creativity.
Oracy, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so spoken skills.
Yeah. But I will let Audrey have a chance, otherwise I will use up all the airtime.
No, it's good. I guess that was education as a whole, but it was also FE, universities, training provider specific. So it's useful. It's great.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, obviously technology is a big one there. I think there are, of course, we'll come on to the use of ChatGPT and large language models, which is something we probably weren't talking about 12 months ago. But I think there's a couple of other things as well in that sort of post-16 education arena. One is about places and spaces. You know, how do we reach into communities to connect citizens to lifelong learning? I think that's one theme. I think there is a very worrying trend at the moment around what's called ghost children. That's this generation of young people, of which there's 125,000 plus young people, pupils who've been away from the classroom. And that's about, you know, double the number compared to autumn in 2019. We can't, of course, forget the whole green skills, green economy. How are we going to be able to incentivize this next generation of learners to be broadening their horizons? I think the teachers and support workers are hugely stretched. Wherever you go, you hear people say things like, I'm doing the job of 3 compared to a few years ago. In some cases, I'm doing the job of 6. So I think we have to look at technology as a social technology, as a force for good, find really clever ways of using it so we can ease the pressure and the burden on our teachers and lecturers and other educators. And then finally, I think making use of the evidence base, and that also includes well-being, you know, using technology along with human in the loop. And I'll say more about that later. But those are the trends I see.
Yeah, so a lot happens in a short amount of time in education, right? A lot driven by the government, some of the stuff that it instigates and some of the stuff that it takes a while to figure out. I guess what I've been talking to people about over the last month or two is, money and budgets as normal. I mean, the Scottish colleges had their budgets cut by 10% and the Northern Irish ones had them cut by 20%, having to cut some of their courses, some of them, which is a shame, but, you know, there's opportunities to streamline and be more efficient. I guess looking at the apprenticeship side of things, I know 2 of the huge companies, I think Serco and Capita, made a lot of cuts in terms of their staff. recently, and I know that one of the huge players is potentially moving out of the apprenticeship market full stop because of the struggle to make it profitable at the lower end with the higher volumes. Some of the kind of higher priced apprenticeships like the firefighting service and so forth being more profitable. But I think there's big reforms coming in the apprenticeship side. I guess if we look at Purlos's clients, you've got FE colleges, training providers, unis. You kind of would split up an FE college or a training provider between different types of learners. Is it 16 to 19-year-olds, which is the biggest amount of revenue or population for most of the colleges, or is it AB and adult learners, which is, it's a smallish area but slightly growing. So the training providers that we work with, most of them are pitching and trying to win bids for adult learning programs. Through government, seems like a lot of the big DWP tenders that were awarded a few years ago kind of shutting down, and not as many kind of opening up. And the Conservative government, in terms of austerity, aren't really spending that much. So depending on whether Labour get in next year, there might be changes then. But yeah, very, very interesting, very useful. And what about admissions, growing revenue? Whether you're looking at a training provider, and usually the training providers, unless they're somebody like the Skills Network, where they have 3, 4, 5 month longer term kind of adult contracts, they are more short term than the colleges, where they're looking to convert learners for admissions as early as kind of November last year to get them to start this September. What do you think potentially might be some of the things they're thinking about at either a college or a training provider in terms of enrollments? What do you think, Sally? I mean, you probably got relative experience with this.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty coming off mute. I think that it's an interesting one with recruitment. So if I take in the institution that I was at, we used to have a pattern of like 3 years flatlining with admissions and recruitment, and then spike increase, and then flatline and spike increase. But one of the issues with recruitment is not just about the numbers, but it's where they go. And if you don't keep on top of it, what you end up with is you get the same number of students, but you get extra in IT, but very few in another area. And that creates staffing problems. So you've got no more money, but you have far more students in one area than you were anticipating. And that's quite a difficult issue if you don't keep, in a way, your students live and keep as many over the summer coming to you in September. I think we also, with admissions, for me, is how we use that 42 days. We choose admissions, and then we put people into a bracket too soon, rather than use the 42 days to actually see what people's talents and skills are. And unfortunately, I don't think GCSEs tells you it. And I don't think we do enough work over the summer with those students to find out what are they doing and finding out about them. And I think with modern technology, we could do more on it. I think apprenticeships is a different issue, because often some colleges have the jobs but don't have the young people, and other people have the young people but don't have the jobs. And you've got to have both, because an apprenticeship, if you like, is an employment contract to the future. So I'm not sure that does answer your question, David, but I think it puts a few conundrums that we have as college leaders.
Yeah, well, I guess the question is, what are colleges or training providers thinking about in terms of maximizing enrollments? And I guess one thing you touched on is, probably using RCU Vector or Lightcast or some kind of labor market data system. They look the year before and say, right, how many learners am I going to get in my engineering course, my STEM course, my plumbing course? And then the next year, they're more than 10% out on their predictions, either plus or minus. Yeah. And you want to be as predictable as you can, but it's pretty tough with all of the small things that would affect those changes. And yeah, we see with our clients that quite a lot of popular courses are oversubscribed, and getting new teachers and new rooms to add another course is impossible, because it's all based on the funding that you apply for. So it can be quite difficult. But One thing that we did 3 years ago with our very first client, Nescott, was literally ask a very simple question on WhatsApp, which never got asked before because they didn't have the scale or the time. But it was something pretty simple, which was, hey applicant, how happy are you with your course? 1, very, 2, not, 3, I'd like to speak to a careers advisor. And you just got a bit of insight into how happy they were. And we're just starting to integrate, and we don't generally want to integrate with the colleges. Well, we can if we want, but most colleges don't need to, don't want to. Some do. But if they integrate, some of the problems we came up with integrating with Tribal or Pro Solutions, the MIS systems in the FE industry, was multiple applications, which we've kind of solved now. But a lot of students apply for multiple courses. And I think what you said, Sally, is maybe it can be a bit tough when there's really, really popular courses. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see those trends in the future. And if these labor market data companies, do they really have accurate data? So if you looked at the ChatGPT CEO, Sam Altman, he said about 2 months ago on Twitter, he said, I wonder how much a plumber is going to get paid in 5 years compared to a coder. And ChatGPT is basically automating coding jobs, a lot of them. But for something very practical like a plumber or electrician, they're going to be probably going to be paid quite a bit more. Is that going to increase the popularity of those courses more? And are these labor market data companies going to figure that big trend out? I mean, what do you think about the core side of things, Deirdre? Quite a good segue into your product around offering careers advice. What have you seen in terms of importance of careers advice or key things that are important in the admissions or enrollment process for colleges, training providers, for unis?
Yeah, well, we work with college providers, employability services and universities. I'll give you an example shortly around a kind of pre-enrollment approach working with a university. I suppose that one of the big things really around this careers information, advice and guidance, I love the fact that Sally said, you know, that sort of 42 days. You know, we do tend to put a lot of pressure on the shoulders of young people to immediately decide, right, which course and slot them in. What I'm quite interested in is whether we can use the technology to find out what the man and woman on the street is actually searching for whenever it comes to, you know, particular courses or particular occupations, so that we don't over rely on data which is around forecasting future predictions, which in a way the pandemic blew all of that out of the water. And I think too, one of the things that we should be thinking about is reminding ourselves that to have the AI technology is really good, but we should also be slightly scared of it to some extent around, you know, some people have said to me, I think I'll use ChatGPT and put it in the classroom and just let the students loose on it. And you do have to remind people that it does tell fibs sometimes. And, you know, if I put in, I'm in Derby and I want a college course in Derby for a particular occupation, it'll tell me that that course exists, but it doesn't. So I think we have to sort of, on the one hand, we've got to see that the door is opened now to AI, machine learning, and OpenAI, Bing, Bard, etc. And we can't close the lid on all of that. But I think from an enrolment perspective, we can definitely use technology to reach into communities and also to find out what time of the day are people looking for courses, what sort of things are they looking for. I'll say a bit more about that shortly.
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe one very short question just before moving on, starting the agenda. I'm just thinking, as soon as students you know, go to college, go to uni, go to a training provider, they get on a course, great. But if they're getting on a course just because they've been kind of incentivized by college training provider to get on a course, and it's maybe not the right course, what would be success in your eyes? Would it be somebody just getting on a course? I'm guessing not, but when they leave college, finishing college for 2 years, or going through a training provider course, or finishing uni after 3 years, then getting into a job. What if that job never increases in salary or increases in responsibility? I mean, our mission used to be getting 10 million people into education by 2030. It's now getting 10 million people into a positive destination by 2030. The difference being really it's getting them into education or a job. the way that we track destinations is looking at not just getting into a job at the same level, but are you going up a level, you know, from level 2 to level 3 to level 4? Like, what is success, do you think, in terms of either the learner's point of view or the education provider's point of view? Would it be somebody getting a job and having it for 6 months, or staying there for 10 years? Or what do you think? How do we look at success?
Well, from my perspective, and I'm looking at this through a careers exploration approach, you know, success looks like our education system has equipped individuals to be lifelong learners. And so sometimes our fixation on, you know, what job do you want to do? What do you want to be? I'm all about making sure that 24/7, if somebody wants to do a bit of exploring what my options are, and in a sense they can self-help, or they can maybe get a bit of extra assistance, or if they want some in-depth support, they can get it. But I think we've made some of this decision making too scary, and we switch a lot of adults and young people off. And I think if we keep it simple around, we can use the technology to strengthen enrolments, to be much smarter around how we can use the evidence that sits behind the technology approaches. And then basically, let's just encourage more people to be curious about there's lots of different ways in which you can lead a very fulfilling life. And and particularly, you know, many people you know, do find themselves on a college course and it's the wrong one. So I think the technology can help ameliorate some of that.
Yeah, no, perfect. I think we'll go into the agenda now. I think we'll just go down a bit more specific. Specifically, we could talk about a lot of things around learner engagement, different parts of the problem, but I think that we're going to look at enrollment, or I know that we're going to look at enrollment today because it's the title of the webinar. So we'll go a little bit down deeper. Just going to look at 4 very simple areas. What are some of the classic problems that we see in enrollment and admissions? What about some of the the trends and the tech? Look at that briefly. Look at the human versus tech approach. Talk about careers advice, since we've got you here today, Deirdre, as well, which would be good. I know I've been on a few webinars recently where Ofsted has said the feedback on the level of careers advice in certain providers across country hasn't been that good. So I think there's a big focus on it. And then maybe look at some actions at the end. Okay, I've come to this webinar. I'm worried about, you know, application numbers or enrollment conversion. Like, what can I do? So we'll dive straight in. So probably one for me to talk about, but maybe a little bit, well, probably both of you actually, but definitely you, Sally. I don't know how involved in the enrollment process you were, but I'm guessing probably. Before looking at this in terms of an FE college, I look at the kind of priorities as growing, getting students through admissions, quality, also finance is a big priority. What do you think? What do you think to those priorities? Do you think that they are the most important priorities to a college or even a training provider, or do you think there's anything else?
I think the whole enrolment process is often quite cumbersome. We don't use enough technology. We put effort into some areas and not others. So once somebody has applied, we interview them, but who do we interview? So I can think of some students where their parents almost do the interview for them. I think we need to look at how we interview our learners, and is there another way of doing it? So for many jobs, you put a little bit of yourself and you send it in online. We tend to still interview by the student coming in, making the appointment. So I think we need to think about what is the purpose of interviews. And if we're just going to take everybody, what was the purpose? Where do parents come into it? And then I think, where does technology come into it? Because it's often very heavily paper orientated. People fill in forms badly, they then fill them in again, they give the same. So I think technologically all of this could be streamlined. I think also we lose young people, because young people, how many of us at 16 would have gone somewhere by ourselves? So do we actually create communities of learning before they join us? Do we communicate with those students over the summer? Another pinch point for enrolments is results day. I get better results than I anticipated, and often my school will tell me to stay on and do A-levels because, look, I was cleverer than I thought. How are we communicating on that results day to take that away from the schools? We can't go into schools, but again, with things like Chatbox, we could actually be congratulating and encouraging the student to come to us, or the student that's done worse and is feeling depressed. So I think there's a whole way that we need to automate and then more personalise to the individual, but also get groups of students together. So when I am about to start in September and I'm afraid to go by myself, I go back to school because all my friends are going back to school. If we've created a community of learners over the summer, I'm more likely to go into college. What are we doing differently? Because going around even now watching colleges, they haven't hugely changed it, but some colleges are looking at technology to change it.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? You know, what will change in the next 10 years in education, but what won't? You know, probably be using emails still to message students. I'm going to just go quickly over this slide. I think we need to just concentrate and go through a few of the slides, but this is an area where we've got quite a lot of experience. I would say the way that Purlos is now looking at it this year, because we work with all post-16 providers, is by funding type. So the difference in terms of the motivations or the structure of the enrollment or admissions or whatever process usually links to how the funding drives it. So 16 to 19-year-olds, the funding calculation is pretty complicated, you know, maybe overly so. A-B conversion is driven by a number of different things, but you've got skills boot camps, you've got apprentices. The application process for apprentices is usually pretty different. That's the most different. So yeah, if I broad brush it between kind of training providers and the colleges would start getting applicants in November, sometimes some of them more on top of it students, and they're trying to keep these applicants warm all the way through to September. Things only really start heating up around kind of now or June, July time. And that's where the most of the dropouts happen over the summer until enrollment on September the 3rd. And these are some of the bottlenecks for the colleges. Typically, we see conversion rates from applicant to enrollment of about anywhere from 40 up to about 80%. So they'll be somewhere in there, most of the FE colleges. And we have seen some as low as 25. We've seen some as high as 85. If you have an 85% conversion, doesn't necessarily mean that that's good. We had a few rurally based FE colleges. And if they're getting 85% conversion, they're doing no better than the last 10 years. There is a very limited amount of people in the rural areas. And so most colleges would like to increase their conversion rates. We always used to focus on improving conversion rates, but we now think that it's not as important as enrollment numbers, because you could get higher or lower numbers of applicants and they could have been weaker or stronger than your applicants in the year before. So that's kind of a typical picture. If you're looking at training providers, usually adult courses, shorter courses, they can be anything from a week to a month, rather than that admissions process, which is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months for a college. Usually the conversion rates are much lower, kind of 2-3%. The kind of sales leads or applicants that would go to a website for things like skills boot camps that Capita runs for the government, or the Skills Network or Learning Curve group runs, the learners will, or the applicants will apply on a website, and the conversion can be 2-3%, so really low. And trying to get them convert is about educating them, and the admissions process is much, much shorter. So they're quite different. But if you focus on the FE college admissions process, this is typically what it looks like. So applied, how many people have half filled out an application form? Have you actually tracked that as a college? Do you have that data? We used to go out to people who've half filled out an application form, which is 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long. No wonder some people drop out. Can you make it a little bit easier? Could you create a very short pre-application form just to get them to that stage? When you're inviting people to events, a lot of it is done on paper, getting people to fill out application forms. And the question is, once they've filled out an application form, whether it was them or their parent or both, how likely are they to come just because they filled out that application form? Could you nudge them on WhatsApp after to see how keen they are? Have you maybe even asked them what they thought about the application process, or whether your college is their top choice? And Deirdre, you know, we send messages around whether students are on the right course. One of the biggest indicators, we get 55% of our messages on Purlos about careers and what course the learner is on. So obviously very, very important. The biggest dropout is enrollment day, whether they haven't got an email, they forgot about turning up, or maybe they got persuaded to go to another college. So we make sure that we message people before enrollment to make sure they turn up. And if they don't turn up, we message them afterwards quickly on a really good channel to get them to come back in. So we made, I think, 500,000 for RNN last year, college group off that, and 1.2 million for BMET off that. That is the biggest area of dropout in terms of our data. And then just what you said, Sally and Deirdre, the 6-week period, lots of dropout there for a number of different reasons, not being on the right course, high anxiety levels. We even did a message with West Notts College, who thought they were very good at supporting SEND students, and we messaged students saying, hey student or applicant, here's the 9 most common issues: learning disabilities, dyslexia, pick which one you have if you have one. And then the college now knew that there was X number of students with severe dyslexia that turned up on day one, and they could be spoken to by a staff member rather than having that high anxiety level and dropping out. So that is a bit of an overview of the last few years of some of our data. I don't know, does that match anything you've ever seen, Sally? Because obviously you used to work at the college.
Yeah, no, it sounds, I think that sounds a reasonable summary. And as I say, I am working in some colleges now, and I think the point that both you've raised, Deirdre, and I've both raised is, my question is, what's enrolment for? And I know that sounds stupid because we treat it as we must have everybody enrolled in a particular way, a particular set of dates, and then they all go on the course for 42 days, and we sheep and goat them, and we lose them. And I just think the whole process needs to be looked at. And I know it's for our funder to get funding, but what is the student experience also like? They are our customer, and I sometimes think we do it from the point of view, we've got to get everybody on the system because we've got to get our money by certain dates, rather than say, how do you experience it as a 16-year-old?
Yeah,
I think also, Sally, the same applies, you know, for adults as well, whether it's onto an apprenticeship or into a college or, you know, going to university. And I really liked what you said earlier, Sally, around personalised. You know, we need to have more personalised approaches. And that is where I think the technology can really help. I wonder whether we should just go to the next slide and I just say a few words, David, or is there anything?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, this pie chart is an overview of all of the questions asked on Purlos. 54% around careers advice, and Purlos doesn't give AIG careers advice, but we do send a link to triage them off the careers teams of the unis or the colleges. But this is kind of where you've got quite a bit of experience, Deirdre.
But yeah, the background, just very, very briefly, is I've spent quite a few years looking at the use of technology and career coaching in a public employment service, sort of European UK angle. And what I discovered really was that back in 2018-20, which is not that long ago, there were not many people talking about the use of artificial intelligence and chatbots. So hats off to David and the team, who I think have done a fantastic job in the short time that they've been sort of developing this. So I was very keen to see, could we use artificial intelligence to make it quick and easy to find careers information and advice. And I think in the context of this particular session, and I'll pop a link in the chat in a second, but I brought together a small team of careers and technology specialists, and we developed CC, the careers chatbot. This is just a few screenshots. And, you know, from the get-go, it's really important that it's personalised, it's not over-bureaucratic, and that the person feels safe around their career exploration. So it's just an example really where we can use technology. We can either embed it into a website. So for enrolment, I'll give you a practical example. Arden University, which is a private university, and many universities are in the same position, as indeed colleges are and training providers, is that they have a responsibility to their local places and to the citizens in which they sort of where they live and they serve. And so what Arden University did was they said, look, we've got a real worry about pre-enrolment. One, we think we're losing some people because of the complexity of the system. And then secondly, we want to show people that we are sort of offering personalized information and advice. And they did take quite, I think, a grown-up approach, which was they recognized that they have a small team of advisors, I think probably about 5 advisors to thousands of students who want sort of information and advice on courses and routes. So what we did is we customized this version of CC, and it's now live on the Arden University website. I'll pop it in the chat, but I wanted just to use that to illustrate that we can actually use these different types of technology, but I believe we have to keep the humans in the loop. So if you're someone in this session and you're thinking, you know, are we going to just talk to you about the technology, you know, providing the silver bullet to all of this? It won't. So for example, we know that people want that personalized and a warm handover. So what we have done with CC is we have created a speak to a human advisor option, and that can connect into the teams. And not only that, you can actually send an advisor a message beforehand so that they know if Sally rocks up to talk about, you know, a course, that Sally is empowered to say, look, you know, these are the topics I want to discuss. So you're not just sitting there waiting somebody coming in and then trying to, in a short space of time, work out what they want. So I am passionate around how we can use the data. And if I can just share my screen for just 2 seconds, I'll just give you an example here of how Arden, can you see the screen okay?
Yep.
So what Arden have done is they've taken CC, and with our help, really, they have developed a very, very interactive careers chatbot. I love the way they look at, are you a career starter, a career changer, or a career developer? And from the outset, you're sort of empowering the individual. And then just to finally show you that behind the chatbot, there is a database, you know, where we can see the gender, ethnicity, age. One college we've been working with wanted to know about, you know, percentage are disabled, but this is very much about careers information and advice. So I think we can use the intelligence more. And here, for example, you can see that when I search here, I can get a really good idea of the people who are using the bot. They want to be sports players in this case. They want to be aircraft pilots. They want to be teaching assistants, veterinarians, etc.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty useful.
I think that what we've got to do is do our best by actually listening to the man and woman on the street. We can use the technology to give us ideas of trends. And I think this is where, if I hand over back to David, you know, the stuff that David and the team have been doing, I just think is great around harnessing WhatsApp and getting that quick and easy, make it as simple as possible, keep that relationship going.
Yeah, well, hopefully Arden will work with us as well. Looks like it may work with them after your introduction, but I think the human and the tech side developed together is just, it's critical, really. I think we've got more slides than we need to get through, so we'll probably speed up a bit. But just to finish off the enrollment problem side of things, an obvious one is workload. It's been mentioned about quite a few times, whether it's a training provider, a sales team, or a customer service team, or a college's learner engagement or admissions team. Generally, just like Arden, don't have enough admissions team, just because of, you know, the massive amount of learners to give careers advice, or even to get them through the admissions process. We see a lot of clients have a lot of repetitive queries that should be automated. Why are you answering the same question again and again? And the key thing is some of the comms channels are quite ineffective. So email and phone, we've been seeing working less and less for younger learners. So workload is quite an important area, and you see the same thing, Deirdre, don't you? I think I remember you talking about this.
It's the big thing. Everybody says they're doing the job of 3 or 4, 5 people, and we've got to look after their well-being, so we can use the technology so that those who are really skilled can apply those skills and provide the in-depth support. And then others who just need information, advice, like you and me, we can just go and get it if we need it.
I mean, the last 2 years, the biggest change makers in the last 6 months to our enrollment system, it was that admissions couldn't set up a load of campaigns in our system. They just didn't have enough time. So we automated 4 campaigns for them. They had to do hardly anything, virtually no data uploads, don't even need to integrate. And that was the biggest change that worked. And then all the tailored and personalized stuff we gave to teams that did have time during peak hours. But yeah, this is self-explanatory. It looks at some of the most impactful social media tools, and there are a lot. Just think about A/B testing a few different tools in enrollment. That's probably a good approach. I mean, what we've seen over the last few years is email and phone is not going to stop being used tomorrow, but there are new channels, things like Discord or TikTok, Snapchat, WhatsApp. Really important thing is that WhatsApp has a business API. So if you're doing groups or you're doing personal one-to-one WhatsApps, it's not GDPR compliant, so be a bit careful of that. And also need a business API like WhatsApp to be able to send one-to-many scalable messages. You can't do that on Snapchat, can't do it on Discord or anything like that. So that's quite important. I guess ChatGPT, I guess I'm very interested in ChatGPT, but I guess people get a bit sick about hearing about it, but it just shows a very, very impressive product has been made. Generally, I'm going to ask you a general question. In fact, I'm going to tell you one thing first. So it's being sold to colleges at the moment in the UK. Transform Education, run by Peter Kilcoyne, who was the Ex-Blended Learning Consortium head, and also Isam Babukan, who worked at Westminster College. He was one of their Microsoft leads. They've created a company which has already got about 20-ish FE college clients that uses ChatGPT to create curriculums and courses for much less effort and not a lot of cost either. And it's got guardrails and safety rails around it, and then it's got experts around it, and it seems to be going great at the moment. So it is already being used. However, I saw this morning, I don't think even you saw this, Deirdre, but looks like the EU lawmakers might even rein in ChatGPT. They might even not allow it to be used in the EU. I doubt that will happen, but the regulation they've looked at might be tough for ChatGPT and OpenAI to actually live up to, and that's exactly what Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, said yesterday at a UCL speech that he did at UCL yesterday in the UK. So you've got to be a little bit careful about where you do and don't use it. But what do you both think about it? Pluses and negatives, and then overall. Sally, maybe you got a few thoughts, I think.
I sit on a group called Rethinking Assessment, and in that sense, I think ChatGPT is great. I mean, our whole education system is based on writing an essay, which started to enable people to go to university, and it's not what employers need. Therefore, anything challenges that, I think it's got to be a good thing. So I'm hoping ChatGPT will disrupt our education system, because what employers say are most important is behaviours, whether you want to call it character, behaviours. So, you know, are young people resilient? Can they learn to learn? Do they have confidence? Can they take feedback, etc.? Skills come next, and actually knowledge is the least needed. But most of our examination system is, can we collect a group of knowledge and write it into an essay? And ChatGPT, whether it's banned or not, has now created a schism in our system. And certainly universities are looking at how they're going to make judgments when they know that even if this is banned, there will be something else, and communication is free. So I think it's a big disruptor, as is all generative AI. And I think it challenges how we think of assessment. And I know I give this on every platform, but when I'm wanting a plumber to plumb my house, I don't ask what
plummet.
his skills are like. I want
Yep.
him to be able to have the skills to plumb a house. And for me, assessment is the appropriateness for the task. Does that mean I want illiterate people? No, I don't. I think people need the ability to learn, but I think we need to be more innovative in our assessment and how we engage in learning. So I think ChatGPT will help us rethink assessment. And actually, if you're doing anything like jobs and job descriptions, it's fantastic because of music. It's just, it has definitely, it makes your life easier. I just think, and it's Deirdre's point, you know, all knowledge is not accurate. So I think we need to be able to check and understand whether this is false information or accurate information. And that becomes a new skill we all need to acquire.
Exactly. Memory or being able to think about data or having knowledge is not going to be the skill, is it? It's all out there. It's going to be the analysis of, you know, what is right and what is wrong. And not all data around at the moment is actually accurate, just like you said. So the skills that you're going to need are going to change. What do you think? What do you think, Deirdre?
Yeah, well, I think it's always useful to remind ourselves that it was in 1996 that the first sort of discussion about bots came about in a psychotherapy context. You know, could you design a chatbot for psychotherapy? And here we are now in 2023, and all we talk about now is ChatGPT. So it isn't completely new, but what is new is the explosion of large language models and access to it. So what I think we need to think about is this notion of trustworthy information, advice and guidance. And I'm currently looking at, as indeed everybody is, around, can you put guardrails around some of this? Now, one way of looking at it is, you know, professional associations, the Career Development Institute asked me to write something for them around codes of ethics and just simple terms like, you know, large language models. You know, unless you're ensconced in it, you don't really know what that is. So there's a kind of job to be done for the workforce, I think, around educating the workforce about the pros and the cons. But in summary, like, the lid is off the box now. And, you know, it's going to be impossible to ban it worldwide. It's as if, you know, pretend you've never seen it. We've all, many of us have seen it. So what I'm interested in is, can we take the best of it and put it into a bot? That's the sort of thing I'm looking at. And I know, David, you're looking at that too. So don't dismiss it, but we use it for, people talk about disruptive technology, and I do get that, but let's talk about social technology as well. Technology that makes our lives better, makes it easier, and gives us more, if you like, motivation to want to learn. So I think it's exciting but scary at the same time.
Yeah, but you can't stop it. I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, we've got 10 minutes and probably 3 slides, so I think I'll go, if we can go through this and the next one quite quickly. There's some specific things. And just FYI, on ChatGPT, we're looking at how we can create kind of materials to prepare for Ofsted inspections. So there's so many benefits. But yeah, as I said, we'll move on so we can finish by 4. Just talk a little bit about Jenny, Purlos chatbot, and a little bit about CC very quickly. This is just one example of a flow of messages that we use with triggers to make sure more people turn up to interviews. And one of the key things is this goes out on WhatsApp, and if they're not on WhatsApp, goes out on text, and gets through to, on average, 4 times as many people. So, and this is a big area of dropout of the interview bottleneck. So you can see, hey student, Jenny here from College X. You missed an interview with us. I've got some options for you. What do you want to do? Press 1 for rearrange a date and time, 2 for book a call, 3 for withdraw the application. And then you have different flows based on which one they choose. And we had, I think, 42% of people that dropped out to 2 interviews for Hopwood in Manchester, Hopwood Hall College. They rebooked back in, and an average of about 30%. So this is a kind of idea about how you can use that technology. It doesn't need to be AGI at this level. It can just be, right, they haven't seen an email on rebooking their interview. Let's get them back in. Just a quick one on this, Deirdre.
Yeah, I can briefly just cover this slide. I think in essence what we've got to do is try and make it as easy as possible for that career exploration. And, you know, there's a whole host of things, ways in which you can use the bot. And it isn't always about just giving information or advice. Remember that a lot of people, even in their 50s or 60s, they still don't know what they really want to do with their life when they grow up. Remember that. I keep telling, you know, my sons and my daughters and others that, you know, we put a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of individuals to come up with something. So I think very quickly, really, I just want to reinforce this message that volunteering, you know, combining sort of study in higher further education, apprenticeships, training, that we just need to kind of widen the options and really just to say that I don't think AI can provide in-depth skilled guidance. You have to keep the human in the loop. And that's how we can work with institutions around making those connections to career teams to make sure that it's personalised and that, you know, people when they arrive at college, basically, they don't fall through the crack.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Deirdre. I guess just to wrap up, you know, this webinar was about maximizing revenue through enrollment. So what are some things you can think about in terms of improving that? Whether you're a training provider or a college, you know, it's kind of the same message. So what Purlos has seen in terms of, I'd say, trends, patterns over the last few years, busy people in education don't have that much time. As soon as you've got your enrollments, you're on to the next year applications, and we don't see that people spend or have enough time to sit down and analyze the weaknesses. So you might, most colleges, when I asked them over the last 3 years, what's your conversion rate, I would say probably at least 50% of them didn't know, which is probably an important stat to know. Do you know your applications? Do you know them at certain different points during the peak periods? Do you know your enrollment numbers from last year? Do you know which marketing channels you used? Do you know which ones were best? So at least spending a little bit of time, at least one day, looking at last year's numbers and conversion rates to see where you're weak, because the data will probably tell you where you're actually weak, rather than where you think you're weak. And then you aim your strategy there. That probably would flow into and segue into testing new approaches. So, you know, how often have you tested a new approach other than email and phone? Email and phone not being effective is the biggest problem we see that is just permeated through every one of our clients. It's, you know, it's something that is pretty obvious to us now. So why not test something else? You might be quite surprised. And you got to think about legals there as well. As I said, there's quite a few things like Snapchat, which might be quite cool, but we wouldn't be GDPR compliant from that point of view. And all of our clients, we just about to sign up a big training provider who does training for GCHQ, and their GDPR questionnaire was about 300 pages long. So it's complex, the GDPR side of things, and it's important to look after the learner data. But that's just one thing to think about. Then looking at setting a goal, what is your goal? Is it improving the conversion of applicants to interview, or interview to enrollment, or events to enrollment, or just applicants to enrollment in general, or just increasing the enrollment numbers, or increasing the enrollment numbers on certain courses? You know, look at the problem. We always look at the problem for our clients. What is your biggest problem? Is it conversion? Is it low enrollments? Is it enrollments onto a certain course? What is that goal? Most of the colleges will come up with an enrollment target, and they will also have a stretch target. How did you do it, Sally? In terms of, you know, your goal for, I'm guessing it's just get as many enrollments as possible, or am I wrong there?
To be fair, it wasn't just getting as many, because you've got to look at your space and resources. So each area had an enrolment target, because of course you can only get so much money for those students. So if you over enroll, you don't get the money in a year, you get in a year's time. So we had a stretch target and then an enrolment target, and we didn't actually want to go above the stretch target, because it impacts on the quality, impacts on the staying on rate, and then the following year less people join you. So I do think you have to be careful and do it with integrity. You know, the old adage of buns on seats actually might work for 1 year.
Doesn't fit
But
anymore.
the following year, you've got to look at your reputation. So we were very clear: targets, stretch targets, and then you have to have, unfortunately, a waiting list.
Yeah, a quality director versus finance director mindset, right? Finance director wants us, you know, and the quality director probably wants the best students possible to get past that 6-week period. Okay, that's great. Automating tasks is an obvious one. Anybody who's in admissions or marketing here, you should use some. There's things like Buffer, which would schedule your social media posts. There's Phantom Buster, which we use at Purlos, which basically automates 1 million social media tasks. There's also systems like Walaxy, which automates LinkedIn, and you know, less useful potentially for the colleges. But there's so many systems out there. You just need to look at some of the innovative startups and what they're using. Maybe just ring a few of them up and ask them. Tech versus human approach. I think we're all agreed that it needs a bit of both, you know, tech with a human touch or human with a tech touch. The combination of both is good. Just one on their own, maybe not. But then analyze your success. Just look at analyzing your enrollment weaknesses, setting a goal, but then analyzing whether you did or didn't hit that, and spend a bit of time doing it. And if anybody wants any advice on that, they could speak to either Deirdre or potentially Sally or myself. Got some contact details down here. I think we might have a couple of people still here, so I don't know if anybody wanted to ask a question, but if they do, put it in the chat. If not, thanks for coming. And most people probably have a meeting knowing, well, knowing you two, but also knowing knowing the industry. So yeah, you can. Let me just check, just in case.
Well, thanks very much, David. It's great just to have this conversation, and hopefully what we've done is we've inspired people not to be afraid of the technology and think about, you know, that kind of creativity bucket that you've got to fill as a professional, and be creative. And, you know, if you don't try it, you're never going to know, are you? So give it a go would be my final message. Thanks ever so much.
Yeah, thank you. And also remember, our students are very familiar with this. We may be not. And actually what we're doing it is for the young people to make them more employable. So we need to keep up to date and be alongside them, not be behind them.
Yeah, agreed. Really appreciate you on, guys. I'll send the video out to everybody in our list, and I'm sure they'll watch it. And yeah, thanks again. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye.